decided to become a filmmaker during my second year in undergraduate studies at the University of Western Ontario. I was taking a Canadian cinema class, and we watched Shelley Nero's film Honey Moccasin, which is a really great narrative from the 1990s made in Canada. And it hadn't occurred to me that a First Nations woman could make narrative films. I thought we were relegated to documentary filmmaking, which is also something that I love. But to be able to put my stories, the stories that I had in my heart and in my head, on screen for everyone to see was really inspirational to me. Like I said, Shelley Nero's been a big influence for me. Her films are they're just really well done, and they're stories um, of First Nations people starring First Nations people, and I think that's really important. Personally, my mother's always been an inspiration. She grew up in a very rural part of Saskatchewan, Canada, without running water or electricity till she was 13, and she's the arc of her life story has been very inspirational to me. Also, my friend Vanessa Brown, who's a writer in London, Ontario, Canada, her drive and passion for creation is also inspirational to me. Um, I would say literarily, is that a word? In the literary sector, um, I remember reading Margaret Lawrence's book, A Bird in the House, when I was 13. My mom had recommended it to me. I was looking for a new novel to read. And it was the first time I read a novel where I had a visceral emotional reaction to a particular part of the book. And I remember laying in my pink bedroom crying at this story and being so connected to the narrative. And I think that's probably where the spark of storytelling was born in me at 13. Well, for me as a First Nations woman, I think it's critical. I mean, the murdered and missing, I'm getting it wrong, but we're a disposable part of the country in the United States and Canada. Women of color, especially, we go missing, people don't necessarily look right away. Um, to give us a voice, not only just First Nations people, but First Nations women or women of color, I think is incredibly important for the society as a whole. We are not disposable people. We have life, we have stories, and they need to be told. And by telling those stories, and like I said, having that visceral reaction with a book I had read, if we have that empathetic connection with each other, that bridge of otherness starts to close. And I just think it's time that we empathize with each other and share each other's stories, share our stories to each other. Yes, there's I would say a very solid and ever growing community of First Nations and Native American Indigenous filmmakers. Um, I'm part of a small Native American film collective here in Albuquerque, where we help each other tell our stories. We do the camera, produce, audio record, direct, help each other write. Um, Really a collaborative effort. And it's, I mean, when we're at film festivals, it's a reconnection with each other face to face. I have friends in the Pacific Northwest who make films, back in Ontario, New York, even the Sami people, uh, where Indigenous stories are being told. And it's, I think, we're, it's the beginning of a much larger movement, and it's exciting. Well, for me, my main goal when creating films is story first. I tend to make genre films. Of late, teen comedies are something that I've always loved, and I love creating. You can see those on my website, sallykewayosh.com. But I like to set them in a First Nations scenario and star First Nations people. Again, just bridging that gap of otherness. And genre films, I mean, our audiences understand film language, right? So they understand the conventions of a certain genre. So it's not a language that we have to reteach someone. But if we insert First Nations people or people of color within those genres, um, all of a sudden our audience is identifying with those characters already. Do you get what am I being clear? It's it's just as long as the story is there, as long as there is a strong narrative, characters, an audience will identify and empathize with those characters, and empathize with a person that maybe they've not met before, with a culture they've not experienced before. So that's mainly my goal. Well, the first film I made when I moved to New York to attend New York University to School of the Arts, is called Smoke Break, and it's a short 4-minute black and white film, and it's remained popular since 2005. But I would say, story wise, my latest short film, Spring Fever, um, which is about a family of four, two daughters, a mom and dad, and um, again, a teen comedy. I think really highlights maybe familial relationships that I like to explore. Um, would say importantly, I would recommend watching my documentary Three Young Ladies, which is about three little girls from my reservation, Walpole Island, who all were living with cystic fibrosis. So it's a glimpse into the community where I grew up, and I think a really important story for these families and for awareness of a disease that affects a population in my community. So my next project, I'm writing a feature length film called Pamatsuin, which means life in my mother's language, Cree. And it's a coming of age story about a woman in her 50s who's recently um, become an empty nester. And it's loosely based on his experience as a residential school survivor. And she will be helping me as a creative consultant and also with some story elements as well. So it's a tough story to tell, but I think an important one. And I'm glad that she's trusting me to help give her story voice. Sure, and it's a topic that she's new to discussing um openly, and it's we're so connected to our mothers, right? And it in a sense her story is mine and my sister's story as well, because her life experiences affected the type of parent she was, and then affects the type of people we've become. um and it's Yeah, I've approached the research of the narrative, and it is a narrative. It's not a documentary, but I've approached it as a documentary filmmaker in interviews and note taking recordings of interviews, just so that I make sure that those characters ring true and the story is rooted in some kind of reality.